consciences. We're going to look at the evidence that has been cited for it and see how solid it is or how not solid it is.
Everybody's talking about it, though, Jimmy. I'm glad you're doing
Yeah.
that. That's gained. Okay, cool. All right. We'll look forward to that on Friday. 888-318-7884, the number here. One line open right now. So you maybe you're that person who just wants to sneak in before everybody fills up the lines. 888-318-7884. Because the lines are filling up already, let's head straight to them. We'll go to Anonymous in an anonymous location. And Anonymous, are you there with us?
I am, sir. Hello, Cy.
Hi, Anonymous. Nice to hear from you again. Oh, well, I don't know if I'm hearing from you again because you might not be the same Anonymous that called yesterday. But Anonymous, your question for Jimmy.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot. Hello, Mr. Akin.
Howdy.
Yes, hello. So I've been chatting. So I am not myself Roman Catholic, but I do chat with a lot of Catholics, and there seems to be a disagreement concerning the Eucharist. So I'm trying to understand what they believe and what you believe.
Okay.
So there's two. So you've answered this many times. I'm sorry. I have to ask again for the audience. So some Roman Catholics that have talked to me, they believe that the sacrifice of Christ has not stopped, even though he's sitting next to the Father. And so during the Eucharist, it is the continuation of the sacrifice that has not stopped. Others believe that it has stopped, and now what they cite is in the Roman Catholic Catechism 1323. The perpetuate, they interpret the word perpetuate as in preserve. So when Christ's sacrifice is done, it's complete and it's finished, but the blood is in heaven, and that is what is being presented during the Eucharist, even though Christ's sacrifice is done. So there is a difference. So
straighten it out. Straighten it out for us, Jimmy. What is the reality?
Well, it sounds to me like the people that Anonymous has been talking to are both expressing aspects of the truth, but neither account is a complete description of the truth. So one of the points that the book of Hebrews makes, and that Catholics very much agree with, is that Christ only died once. And so he offered himself on the cross in a bloody manner, meaning he died once for all. And that's done. That does not keep happening. Now, there are, in some writings by Catholics, you will occasionally run across a kind of time warp theory that says the Mass is like a time warp that makes exactly what happened on the cross present on the altar. And these writings are not official writings. This is not what you will find in the official documents of the Church. Instead, what you will find is you will find statements in official church documents stressing that the sacrifice of the Mass is the same as the sacrifice of the cross in several key respects. The primary sacrificing priest is the same because it's Jesus continuing to offer himself to the Father. The offering is the same because he's offering himself. And the purpose is the same, namely our salvation. But the manner of offering is different. On the cross, he offered himself in a bloody manner. In the Mass, he offers himself in an unbloody manner. And the Mass is just the earthly outworking of what's actually happening in heaven. So as he's in heaven, depicted in the New Testament as sitting at the right hand of the Father, he continues to intercede for us. And by that intercession, he continues to offer himself to the Father as a living sacrifice. And this is something that's stressed in the 1968 document known as the Credo of the People of God, where Paul VI stressed that Christ is offering his flesh glorified in heaven to the Father. So it's not a new death. It's not a bloody offering. It's not the same sacrifice in that sense, but it is the same sacrifice in these other senses, in that the primary priest is the same, the offering, the thing being offered is the same, and the purpose of the offering is the same. But now he offers himself in a glorified living form to the Father by way of his heavenly intercession. So there are aspects in which the sacrifice continues, but there are aspects in which the sacrifice is different.
Anonymous, I'm going to leave it there and hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. As I said, lines keep filling right up, so we're going to keep moving. Devontae in Odessa, Texas is next. Hi, Devontae. No? I know I'm pushing the right button. All
Hello?
right.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are, Devontae. How are you?
Sorry, I accidentally had you on mute. I'm great. How are you guys?
I do that all the time, Devontae, so we're just happy to have you. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, sir. So something I've been studying recently, it's so funny because I'll be studying Catholicism and then I stop and then I start again. The doctrine that I've been studying recently is purgatory, and I've tried to familiarize myself with the Catholic perspective by actually listening to informed Catholics. So what exactly would you guys say is purgatory, and why is purgatory necessary?
Purgatory, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is the final purification that God performs for people who die in a state of grace so that they'll be able to enter the full glory of heaven. Because when we commit sins, even though the guilt of the sin, especially the eternal guilt of the sin, is forgiven, there are consequences that remain. You know, for example, we develop bad habits. And so even if you're forgiven for the bad things you've done, you still have these disordered desires that have been habituated in you, and those need to be fixed before you're ready to be in heaven. We're not going to carry those bad habits with us into heaven. And so consequently, over the course of the Christian life, God gives us his grace, and when we cooperate with it and say, you know, I'm going to resist that habit today. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give in to that temptation. We help purify, by God's grace, our nature. We grow in holiness. That's sometimes referred to in both Catholic and Protestant theology as sanctification, because it makes us more saintly or holy. And for most people, that's not complete by the end of life. Most of us still have some bad habits at the end of life. We still have some lingering consequences from the things we've done that need to be dealt with. And so at the end of life, between death and the full glory of heaven, God purifies us. He completes the sanctification that he had already began in this life. And that final rush of sanctification, that completion of sanctification, is what is referred to as purgatory, because it purges us or makes us pure. And we're told in the book of Revelation that nothing unclean will enter the heavenly city. And so we do need to be purified. We need to be purged of the remaining consequences of sin, both original and personal, in order to be in God's full presence in heaven. And so that's what purgatory is. The Catholic Church doesn't have teachings about how long this takes. It may happen in the twinkling of an eye. In fact, in his encyclical on Christian hope, Spe Salvi, Pope Benedict said that we can't measure it in earthly time. So, the church doesn't even try to do that. We have to leave that up to God, but based on revelation, and not just the book of Revelation specifically, but more generally, God's revelation, and based on human experience, which shows us that most people are not pure by the time they die, we reasonably and rationally reason that there must be a final stage to sanctification that comes between death and glory. And that's purgatory.
And you know what, Devontae, our colleague Carla Broussard has a brand new book coming out, and it's just a couple weeks away from being out, and it's called "Purgatory is for Real: Good News About the Afterlife for Those Who Aren't Perfect Yet." And so Marie will take your data if you'd like to give it to her, and we'll send it to you, but you'll have to wait. Would you like to do that, Devontae?
I am always down for reading. You never have to ask me if I want a book.
All right. Does it remind you of anything where you know a good thing is coming, but you have to wait for that good thing to come? All right. Hang on.
Dinner time?
Yes. It's, dinner. That's a little purgation waiting for dinner. Thanks, Devontae. Hang on. Marie will get your information. We'll send you Carlo's book, Purgatory is for Real, and we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Exorcisms on Monday and Rapture on Wednesday. That's the calendar this week on Catholic Answers Focus. The official exorcist of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis joins us on Monday to discuss the life of an exorcist, what training he gets, and then some stuff that's probably too scary to mention here. Then on Wednesday, we ask Carlo Broussard about the end times, particularly the rapture. Is there any chance that rapture might be real? Catholic Answers Focus is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Get all the details and past shows at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Want the latest pro-life news? Want it delivered? Sign up. It's free. EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your source for everything happening now in the fight to protect the sanctity of human life. New episodes delivered every week to your inbox. So if you really want to know,
sign up today.
Go to EWTN.com/pro-life today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live Open Forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Before we head back to calls, I want to remind you the annual store-wide sale is underway right now. Items at 10 to 25% off and more, some up to 50%. Ebooks, MP3s, CDs, books, DVDs, even our School of Apologetics courses are all on sale. And you can also get $5 flat rate shipping if you live within the continental United States. Just go to shop.catholic.com and get all those savings today. Shop.catholic.com. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And next on the line to talk with Jimmy is Jason in the Philippines, listening on Catholic.com. Jimmy invited the international calls. Jason, it's nice to have you here with us.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting my call.
Oh, of course. We're happy to have your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, if the partial judgment is supposed to be private or personal, and that the final judgment is supposed to be public, then why the church canonizing and declaring saints publicly?
Okay, so it's true that that the particular judgment is something that is private in the sense that it occurs when an individual person meets Jesus in the afterlife and he's judged and his soul either is saved and goes to heaven, often with a stop in purgatory first, or is lost because he's rejected God and ends up going to hell. And this is not manifest to the world. This is something that happens privately. Maybe angels get to look at it and maybe saints in heaven get to look at it, but we here on earth don't get to look at it. And so it's private from our perspective. At the general judgment, at the end of time, that will be public. Jesus talks about how, what we've done in secret will be proclaimed from the housetops. And so there seems to be a public aspect to that judgment that's different. But just because the particular judgment is private from an earthly perspective, and just because we don't see it happening, because it's a spiritual reality rather than something you could see with your physical eyes, that doesn't mean we can't gain evidence about whether or not someone has passed that judgment and has gone to heaven. In fact, already in the Old Testament, we see passages where God allows departed saints who died in God's friendship to appear to people on earth. In the book of 2 Maccabees, for example, the departed high priest Onias and the prophet Jeremiah both appear to Judah Maccabee. And so consequently, Judah Maccabee received evidence that these guys died in God's friendship and they're in the good place, even though that wasn't strictly the full glory of heaven as we understand it today because Jesus hadn't died yet. in any event, because Judah Maccabee got evidence that these people were saints, he was able to announce this to others. So even though he didn't witness their particular judgments, he got the evidence he needed to make this announcement to other people. And in the same way, even though we here on earth, and the Pope doesn't see the judgment of a specific individual, we can get evidence that that person did make it to heaven. And one of the primary forms of that evidence is whether or not God performs miracles, verifiable miracles, in conjunction with that person's intercession. Because presumably God is not is not performing miracles for people who are in hell. But if you ask for the intercession of someone and a genuine miracle happens as a result of asking for that intercession, that's evidence the person is in heaven. Now, you still have to face a question of, okay, well, if this person is in heaven, does that mean we want to publicly declare him as a saint? And because if you declare someone a saint, that makes the person an example for the faithful. And so they don't, over at the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, they don't just look at the evidence of are miracles happening in connection with this person's intercession. They also look at the person's life. And if the person lived a life of heroic virtue, they really lived the Christian life to the full, even if they weren't perfect, that makes them a good example to set before the faithful. And so if they've set a good example in this life and there's evidence that they're in heaven because God's doing miracles in connection with their intercession, then that makes them a good candidate for sainthood. And so even though we don't see their particular judgment happening, we can still have evidence that they made it to heaven. And if their example is good enough, the Pope may choose to go ahead and declare them a saint.
Thank you, Jason. I'm going to keep moving. The lines continue full. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Let's go to Universal City in Texas. Patricia, listening on Guadalupe Radio 89.7 FM. Patricia, your question for Jimmy.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes, and thank you for taking my call. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. But
Well, thanks for calling.
Me. I'm lifelong Catholic, 60-plus years. And my mother and my grandmother taught me the rosary. And when we said the Hail, Holy Queen, when it came to O Clement, O Loving, O Sweet Virgin Mary, we struck our breath.
Mm-hmm.
I never was told why. I still do it today, but I'd like to know why. And the other thing I noticed is it's only people, I'm going to say 50 and up, that I see doing this. I don't see that it's being taught, and is it something we should be teaching? Because I have nieces and nephews.
Okay. So there is no single way to say the rosary. And in fact, the Hail, Holy Queen is not actually part of the rosary itself. It's a prayer that is often added to the rosary, but it is not, strictly speaking, part of the rosary. And so this is an example of how there is no single one right way to say the rosary. There are multiple different ways, which is something that John Paul II acknowledged in his apostolic letter on the rosary, where he proposed the luminous mysteries. He acknowledged that there's no one way to do this, and it varies all over the world and among different groups of people. Some people add certain prayers to the rosary. Some people say the bare thing. Some people add scriptural meditation. So there's a lot of flexibility here. In terms of striking the breast during the Hail, Holy Queen, it's a matter of custom. Now, striking the breast is ordinarily taken as a sign of contrition, of saying that one is sorry for one's sins. And so in asking the Virgin Mary to pray to God for us, to be our prayer partner, and you're striking your breast at the same time as saying, O Clement, O Loving, O Sweet Virgin Mary, you're kind of emphasizing her holiness, which she received by God's grace, while at the same time acknowledging our own lack of holiness. And so I would take it as a kind of implicit physical prayer acknowledging I'm a sinner, I need God's grace. You, Virgin Mary, have received God's grace in an amazing, miraculous way. Please pray for me because of my own limitations. And so I would take it as a kind of enacted prayer, acknowledging our own limitations and what God has done for Mary and asking her to intercede for us. But the striking of the breast, just like saying the Hail Holy Queen itself, is something that's optional. I wouldn't tell other people they have to do it this way because the church doesn't tell them they have to do it this way, but it's certainly a fine thing to do if they want to.
Thanks, Patricia. We're going to head on now to Sonoma, Washington. Watching on Facebook Live is Peggy. Peggy, there with us?
Yes. My question is, when I'm talking with my Protestant friends about sin and purgatory, one of the things that comes up is Romans chapter 4, verses 5 through 8, where they're talking about faith credited as righteousness and sins are covered, and blessed is the man whose sins the Lord does not record. Mm-hmm. And the second part to that question is, I believe Jimmy Akin, in the book, The Drama of Salvation, and also in Carl Keating's book, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, the statement was made that the few times the Bible mentions covering sins refer not to the forgiveness of sins by God, but to the forgiveness of one man's sins by another. But in neither of those books is there a citation made to the verses that show that example. And so my question is kind of two-part. One, what is meant by how does the Catholic look at sins are covered and not recorded, and trying to explain purgatory and whatever to these friends of mine?
Okay, well, let's deal with the second question first. Now, it's been a long time since I've read Catholicism and Fundamentalism. I don't recall what it may have said on this topic. And even though I wrote The Drama of Salvation, I don't remember everything I've ever written, so I could have said something about this. But I would be pretty surprised if I said that the metaphor of covering for sins is only used with respect to one human being forgiving another human being. That is not my understanding of how this metaphor is used either in the Old Testament or the New Testament. So I wouldn't be supportive of that view. I don't think that the evidence supports it. And in fact, I think that the metaphor, or I should say the quotation that Paul gives here in Romans 4 of the Psalms, where the subject is God's forgiveness, I think that would clearly illustrate that the metaphor of covering can be used for divine forgiveness. But as you can hear from that music, we need to go to a break, and so I'll have more to say on the other side.
I hope you can hang on, Peggy. We'll just take a quick break and be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin, and he'll get to finish his answer for your question.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Why is it wrong to help someone commit suicide? Don't people have a right to die with dignity rather than being a burden to others? Does the Church teach that the terminally ill must be kept alive by machines for as long as possible? In 20 Answers, End-of-Life Issues, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you unravel the controversies and confusions surrounding euthanasia, assisted suicide, and the rights of patients in our uncertain healthcare future. 20 Answers End-of-Life Issues is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
We want to know how our Blessed Mother has aided you during your life.
That's our topic tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now, more of Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin with us both hours today for Open Forum, and on the line, Peggy in Snohomish, Washington, asking about the fourth chapter of Romans and the idea that does God cover over our sins? And you were in the midst of your answer, Jimmy.
Yeah, so we talked about the fact that, as far as I can tell, the evidence biblically is that when the metaphor of covering sins, because sins are not physical objects. You know, when we sin, there's not a new physical object there that is then physically covered over. So this is a metaphor. And so is not recording sins, to use the phrase that that Peggy used. Other translations will render that differently. They'll say, "To whom the Lord does not reckon his sins." And there are other translations yet. But these are two, both the covering and the not recording or not reckoning sin are two of the metaphors that get used in Scripture for how God deals with us by his grace with respect to sin. And there are others as well. Forgiveness is another one. Forgiveness, you look at the root of the concept and it's like releasing. So it's a different metaphor. When you forgive something, you release it. Redeeming is another one. When you redeem something, you buy it back. And so God, by redeeming us, buys us back from sin. And there are other metaphors yet, which I do talk about in my book, The Drama of Salvation. Having said that, none of these metaphors should be understood as capturing all of what God does with respect to sin. If any one of them expressed everything God does with respect to sin, then that would be the only metaphor we'd ever need. The fact that there are these multiple metaphors indicates that when God acts in our lives by his grace, it has many different aspects of how he does that. It's kind of like the blind men feeling the elephant. You know, they each feel a different aspect. One of them says an elephant feels like an ear, another says it feels like a trunk, another says he feels like a tree because he's holding onto a leg. All of these are different aspects of an elephant that the blind men can feel, but no one of them gives the whole picture. And it would be a mistake to say because an elephant has a trunk that an elephant is just a trunk. And in the same way, when we have all of these different biblical metaphors for what God does by his grace, it would be a mistake to latch on to any one of them and say, well, this tells us everything we need to know. And so when we're looking at these, we need to say, okay, so what is this one metaphor trying to teach us? And when we encounter the covering over metaphor or the not reckoning or not recording metaphor, basically it's saying that in some way we won't be held accountable for these sins. It's another way of saying forgiveness, or, you know, we're going to be forgiven for them. But that doesn't mean that there aren't continuing consequences to sin. As we talked about a little bit earlier, there are continuing consequences to sin. Even after the eternal guilt of a sin is forgiven and we're released from that, we still have impurities to deal with. We've got bad habits that we've built up as a result of giving into temptation. And since nothing unclean is going to enter the heavenly city, as the book of Revelation tells us, we need to be cleaned up. And that's what purgatory is. It's the final stage of sanctification, and where God makes us holy and ready for heaven. That's a process that begins even in this life, as God encourages us by his grace to grow in holiness over the course of the Christian life. And so your Protestant friends, one of the things you can say to them is, look, you would acknowledge that even after we're forgiven, even after our sins are covered, even after God is not reckoning or recording our sins, that we still need to grow in holiness. That's what sanctification is. And if they're normal Protestants, they will believe in sanctification just as much as you do. And so you can say, well, you have some nice verses here in Romans. We've got them in our Bibles too. And they basically talk about forgiveness, and they also talk about justification, but they don't cover the issue of sanctification. Sanctification is still a process that we need to undergo. It begins in this life, and from the Catholic point of view, purgatory is simply the last stage of sanctification. And since these verses are not talking about sanctification, they don't deal with purgatory one way or the other.
Peggy, I hope it helps. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and there are lots of folks on the line. So I'm just going to keep going, and you can try if you want, 888-318-7884, but thus far the lines have stayed pretty full throughout the day. Let's go to Todd in Michigan, listening on Good Shepherd Catholic Radio. Todd, you with us?
Hi, how you doing, guys?
Hi, Todd. Very well, thank you.
Good. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm actually combining soybeans as we speak. But my question is this. I'm a non-Catholic and a lifelong Free Methodist, which is much more conservative. But I'm very curious about the Pope's new evangelization. Now, obviously, to a Protestant, evangelization to us would mean we'd go for maybe a series of evenings of preaching and evangelistic services, telling people about Christ and bringing them to the Lord. And I've been to many Catholic masses, and I enjoy the Catholic Church. And obviously, that's not necessarily the place for evangelization. So my question is, how is the Catholic Church evangelizing, and what does that look like?
Well, we should start by talking about the basic meaning of evangelization. Now, the term gets used different ways, but fundamentally, evangelization is to announce the gospel. And that's going to mean principally announcing the gospel to people who have not yet accepted it. So they may have heard it, they may not have heard it, but you're talking to the unconverted principally. And the Catholic Church does that in a variety of different ways. In some cases, you have people who are evangelists by profession, and they go and announce the gospel in a variety of different ways. They may do it one-on-one by talking to people. They may do it by holding a seminar or a set of talks where it's encouraged to bring the unevangelized in. It may happen these days on social media. It may happen here on Catholic radio. It may happen on Catholic television. But one way or another, the Church believes in announcing the basic facts of the gospel of Jesus Christ and what he did for us. And it happens in a wide variety of different contexts. It happens both by professional evangelists and by ordinary Catholics. It happens by priests and by bishops. It's fundamentally a duty of everybody to do what they can in keeping with their circumstances and their talents, to do what they can to announce the gospel to people who need to hear it. And so there's not a single model for doing it. Now, sometimes you will have situations where there is a set of talks that are done either in the evenings or at some other time where Catholics will try to bring in people for these talks. Sometimes that's called historically, it's been called a revival. It's also been called a gospel service. It's also been called a mission That's a term that you'll hear in some Catholic circles. Evangelization isn't the only function of those, but you will find evangelization done in many of those. But there's more than one model of how it happens. Sometimes evangelization happens through speech. Sometimes it happens through handing out literature. Sometimes it happens through electronic media. There's a bunch of different ways it happens. But the Catholic Church has obviously been doing it because it's the largest body of Christians on the planet.
Todd, there's a little known rule here at Catholic Answers that if someone asks a question while harvesting, they get a follow-up. So do you have any follow-up for Jimmy?
I'm sorry. What was that, Jimmy?
So I wanted to know if you had a follow-up question.
No, I mean, I totally agree with Jimmy. I think that is great. I think John Ricardo was an evangelist. He could have been a great Protestant preacher just as well as a Catholic preacher. I just didn't know if there was something new. If the Catholic Church has been doing that all along, why did the Catholic Church say, well, now we need to evangelize more? We've sacramentalized, but now we need to evangelize more. This needs to be something that we need to do. I didn't know if there was something new that the Catholic Church was trying to do. I'm all about reconciliation for Christians of all denominations.
Okay. So the reason that you hear about a new evangelization is because, and this happens in every age of the church from one degree to another, it's not the Pope saying we've gotten too sacramentalized and we need to get away from that. That is not what the popes have been saying. But there have been shifts in various parts of the world with regard to the Christian faith. This is something that has happened in every period of Christian history. It's always growing in some places, the faith is. It's diminishing in other places. And in recent years, even though it's been growing in places like Africa and Asia, it's been diminishing in places like Europe and North America. And so you have this large body of people who are historically of Christian heritage, but either they're not practicing their faith or their parents just didn't raise them in the faith, and they need to hear the good news. And so the idea of the new evangelization is we want to evangelize these people who are historically from a Christian culture, but it's the passing on of the Christian faith has been flagging in those cultures, and they need to hear the gospel. And so that's why this is considered a new evangelization or a re-evangelization of these people.
Todd, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the call. We have to take a quick break, however. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin after this.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
You know, I was raised Catholic, but then went to the other side and tried to commit suicide a couple of times several years ago. My savior happened to be a Catholic priest here locally, and I wanted to say, though, surrounding myself with people like yourself and this radio station. This morning I felt kind of alone, and then I was like, oh yeah, EWTN. Oh, I love it.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
You may or may not be aware of this, but it's election season here in the United States, and Catholic Answers has some resources that are free that we'd like to share during this time, just to help people in there as you're making your electoral considerations, whether on the local, state, or federal level. And so we've got some free stuff that's going to post each day. Today they've got an article and a video, 5 rules for Catholic politicians. And it's all up at Catholic.com, or all week this week. There'll be a different set of things leading all the way up to Election Day, I guess. We'll continue doing this. So today's article video, 5 rules for Catholic politicians. Each day you can find these helps to voting at Catholic.com. And as I said, they are free. Jimmy Akin is our guest. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It is open forum today on Catholic Answers. You can call with whatever question you like. And no science questions thus far. Jimmy loves science questions, but you know what? Jimmy's what is it that we say, Jimmy? I know polymath is part of it, but what's the first part of it? I forget. There's 2.
Oh, well, sometimes people point out I'm an autodidact.
Yeah, autodidact polymath. Yes, Jimmy's an autodidact polymath, so you're welcome to call with pretty much any question you want. Up next,
I do like science questions. Just before the show, I was answering an email from a priest about prompt supercriticality in nuclear reactions.
I'm frankly sick of priests asking about that. I mean, let it rest, you know? All right. Japhet in Gainesville, Georgia, watching on Facebook Live. You are next. Your question for Jimmy.
Oh, hey guys. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I just had a question. I used to be part of a Pentecostal oneness church, and I guess like the core belief of that church was that Jesus Christ is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know, I guess what we would call modalism, right?
Right.
And
one of the terms.
Yeah, one of the terms. And another big thing was the baptismal formula in the name of Jesus Christ. And I recently converted to Catholicism, maybe like a year ago.
Great,
and,
wonderful.
Yes, and I still have communication with my friends back at the little community, and I guess a lot of times when we have like a dialogue or something, like one of their favorite scriptures, which you know I know by memory because that was what was taught to me, is from Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6, where it says, "For unto us a child is born, and a son is given. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." One of the interpretation that that was given to us was that here it states that a son is going to be given to us, which is referring to Jesus, but it says that his name is going to be the Everlasting Father. So, I mean, now I know as a Catholic and profess to believe in the Trinity that's absurd.
So what's the proper? What is a Catholic reading of that? Is that what we're working towards, Japhet?
Yes, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so what is a Catholic reading of that, Jimmy?
So there are a couple of different ways of approaching this. There's not an official church teaching about how to understand this verse. The church obviously has this in her Bible, and it's even been very prominent in the history of Messianic prophecy and in Christian art. I mean, there's a whole musical setting of this that's used in Handel's Messiah, for example. And so in terms of how to handle it vis-a-vis the oneness question, there is I can see 2 basic approaches. The first basic approach would be to say that here we have an affirmation of the Son of God or Christ's divinity. And it's emphasizing that he is the mighty God and he is one in being with the eternal Father. He's a distinct person from the eternal Father, but that's a distinction that this verse is not trying to make because the Trinity had not yet been clearly revealed at this time. We had the Old Testament affirmation of monotheism, and we also had a recognition in various passages in the Old Testament that there's, even within the one God, there's some kind of plurality that suggests there may be more than one person. This is a Jewish doctrine that was sometimes called the two powers in heaven doctrine. Or you sometimes have references to Yahweh and the second Yahweh that's somehow God, but also somehow distinct from the regular Yahweh. And so we do have intimations of the Trinity in the Old Testament, but we don't have the doctrine clearly announced yet. Not all of the data has been given. And so this verse, while reflecting the divinity of Christ, doesn't reflect all of the different aspects of the Trinity. Now, that's one way of approaching this verse. The second way of approaching this verse is based on the metaphor of fatherhood, because fatherhood was something that you could use not just in reference to God and not just in reference to your biological father, but also in reference to leaders. For example, there's one point where a person is talking to a Levite, and since Levites were spiritual leaders, the guy in the Old Testament says, "You'll be a father to me." Also, there was an official who we read about later in the book of Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 22, who was the chief steward or chamberlain of the house of David. He ran the palace on David's behalf. And one of the things God says about this figure is that this official will be a father to the people in Jerusalem. So he's going to look out for them, he's going to protect them, he's going to take care of them, things like that. And if you could apply this metaphor of fatherhood even to one of the king's officials, you could certainly apply it to the king himself. And so here in this passage, we have a prophesied coming king, and by saying he's going to be called Eternal Father, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be called God the Father. It may just mean he's going to perform this fatherly role for people. He's going to look out for his subjects. He's going to take care of his subjects. He's going to guide and discipline his subjects the same way a father does. And he's always going to do that. So that's what would be meant by the everlasting part. And obviously there's different ways to translate the Hebrew there. But the idea could be that he's simply always going to perform a fatherly role. You could call him the everlasting shepherd. And it would mean basically the same thing, since a shepherd has a relationship to the sheep that's a little bit like the relationship a father has to the children he guides. And so it could be a mistake to say this is automatically a reference to God the Father. So those would be the two basic approaches I'd propose. The first one would simply acknowledge that this is emphasizing his divinity, but without clearly making all the distinctions among the persons of the Trinity, because the doctrine hasn't been fully announced yet. And secondly, it may be a mistake to assume that this is a reference to God the Father when it refers to a more general guiding and providing for function that the Messianic King will have for the people of Israel.
Japhet, I hope that is helpful to you. I appreciate the call. Thank you. I'm going to try to get at least one more in before we have to conclude this hour. And those who are on the line, hang on, because this is not the last hour. Jimmy's going to be with us for another hour for Open Forum. Let's go to Jason in Michigan watching on YouTube Live. Jason, you there with us?
Hello?
Oh, hi, Jason. How are you?
Well, good. Thank you. Jimmy, I'm very glad that you're the one on the phone. I got your book, The Fathers Know Best, and it's my first gift I give to anyone I'm having a dialogue with, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
So my question, thank you. The question I have is, in Pope Francis's new encyclical, chapter 8, paragraph 271, he quotes the bishops of India saying the goal of dialogue is to establish friendship, peace, harmony, and sharing spiritual and moral values and experiences in a spirit of truth and love. Mm-hmm. And while I was reading the whole encyclical itself, it kind of gave me the idea that we shouldn't be going into a dialogue with the hope of conversion. And so I'm just wondering, what is really the feeling on that?
Well, different people have different feelings about it, but I would say that we want everybody to receive the fullness of the gospel, and so we want everybody to come to Jesus Christ and experience the fullness of his grace and truth in this life if possible. And so, it's not at all unreasonable to talk to people and hope that they will come to embrace the Christian faith. That doesn't mean that we need to shove it down their throats or that we should be deceptive about it. And, that in not every situation in life when we're talking to someone should we be aggressively evangelizing. If you're ordering a pizza for dinner and every time the pizza delivery man comes to your door, you tell him about Jesus, even though he's not responding to it, you're probably going to turn him away from Jesus by making Christians sound like fanatics. And so in the ordering a pizza situation, you don't want to be overly aggressive in evangelizing. And the same thing is true in formal interreligious dialogues. If you have a group of Catholic scholars and, say, a group of Hindu scholars, and they're talking to each other as part of clarifying our points of difference and our points of commonality, well, that's the function of that meeting, is to clarify points of agreement and points of difference. That the function of that meeting is not for one side to evangelize the other, just like the function of ordering a pizza is not to evangelize the person you're ordering the pizza from. The function of the conversation is to get a pizza. And so consequently, if you try to hijack an encounter that has one purpose and unnaturally make it try to serve some other purpose, then you're likely to drive people away and you're being manipulative, and you shouldn't do that. That's not the same thing as saying, hey, I want to share the truth of the gospel with you and I hope you become Christian. That's perfectly legitimate. The question is, are you doing that in a natural, honest way, or are you doing it in some kind of manipulative way?
Jason, I hope that's helpful to you. Thanks so much for the question. Those who are on the line, hang on the line. We're going to come right back with Jimmy, and we will get to your questions. If you haven't called yet and you'd like to give it a try, there's just one line open, but you can see if you can get in there, 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, is our guest this hour, and the topic, well, that's up to you. It's open forum. As Jimmy said, call from anywhere in the world as well. Any question is welcome. Any person is welcome. Any geography. Welcome. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum on a Tuesday. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy's senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of a whole bunch of books, including the most recent one, The Bible is a Catholic Book. 2 new books coming out soon, both into what do we say? The publisher? They're
into print?
And they're coming. They're in print already.
They're coming into print.
Oh, and we're hoping.
I don't know. I'm guessing on where you were going.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm just going to throw some stuff out here. No, into the editing process is what I meant.
They are in the editing process.
They've been turned in. Yeah. What are they going to be on again? Oh, I know one of them is on Come On Back to the Catholic Church.
Well, no, it's an evangelization booklet, which for some people will mean coming back to the Catholic Church, but also coming into it for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
The other one is on the end times.
Oh, is that a 20 Answers book or is it bigger than that?
Yes.
All right, 20 Answers, the end times. All right. I hope I have time to read it before all of this comes to a conclusion. Let's get to the phones because we have Harmony on the phone, and I don't want to lose Harmony's call. Are you there with us, Harmony? Hi, Harmony.
Yes.
Oh, hello, Harmony. How old are you?
7.
Well, thank you very much for your call, Harmony. What is your question for Mr. Akin?
Why do we get baptized?
Why do we get baptized?
We get baptized because Jesus wants us to be baptized, and the reason he wants us to be baptized is because of all the good that it will do for us. When we're born, we are missing a kind of grace in our souls that we need to have in order to be in union with God. And that kind of grace is called sanctifying grace. And since we're missing that, God wants to give it to us. And one of the ways he gives us sanctifying grace is by baptism. So that's one of the good things that baptism does for us. Baptism also makes us Christians, so we become part of the Christian family, and it also allows us to receive the other sacraments. We couldn't receive the other sacraments if we hadn't been baptized. And so those are just some of the good things that baptism does for us. But the basic answer is Jesus wants us to be baptized so that we can have all these good things from God.
Okay, Harmony?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I hope you'll call back again. You're welcome, and you're always welcome to call back again. Jimmy, we didn't even say it's a kids hour and a bunch of kids calling. So Liam, his phone call dropped, and Liam, I'm sorry that happened, but I'm going to read your question to Jimmy. Liam is 10 years old, and he wanted to know, what is adrenaline?
Adrenaline is a hormone, and that means it's a kind of chemical or substance that our body makes. And all of the different hormones have different functions. They do different things for us. One of the things that adrenaline does is it helps us get ready to move. Like if we're exercising, for example, or if we need to run. Like maybe there's something scary, we need to run away from it. Or maybe we need to fight something. All of those involve our bodies needing to move. And so what adrenaline does is it makes our heart beat faster so that it causes our blood to get out to our muscles, where it can be used to help them power the muscles for the movement we're about to do. It also helps us breathe better so that we get more oxygen coming in to help us move. And it does other things too. But basically, one of the main things adrenaline does is it helps us get ready to move, whether that's exercise or running or fighting or whatever it may be. Adrenaline helps you move.
Liam, I hope that answered exactly what you wanted. We appreciate your call. And kids are always welcome, and I'm glad kids know it. I mean, we do kids shows from time to time, but if you're younger, you're always welcome as long as you got permission to dial the phone. 888-318-7884 is our number. We are just moving. We are on to our third question this hour already. Joseph in Lincoln, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. You're next, Joseph. Your question for Jimmy.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
if I understand right, our scripture says that Abraham was 135 years old when he entered into Canaan. How is that?
Oh, how is that possible to be 135 years old when you entered Canaan, you mean?
Yeah, if he was 135 years old when he entered into Canaan and had Ishmael when he was 86, circumcised when he was 99.
He was a late bloomer.
Son of promise at the...
Okay, Jimmy, how is that possible?
Well, so, God is omnipotent, and he can keep someone alive and vigorous longer than would naturally normally be the case if he chooses. So it's possible that God could have sustained him and his strength and vigor miraculously in that way. On the other hand, there are things in Scripture that are not meant to be taken literally. And some people have pointed out that if you look at the ages of the early patriarchs in Genesis, they're a lot longer than people naturally would live. Some of them live over 900 years, which is way more than Abraham did. And people have noted that these numbers may be symbolic. They may be meant to teach us something other than the literal ages of these people. And one of the ways you can see that is by looking at a particular individual, one of the patriarchs that's mentioned in Genesis named Enoch, who is said to live for 365 years. Well, the number 365 should leap out at just about everybody because that's the number of days in a solar year. So to have someone live 365 years, that's kind of a coincidence that it's exactly the same number as the number of days in a solar year. And so various people have proposed maybe this isn't meant to be literal. And if his age isn't meant to be literal, maybe these other ages aren't either. And in fact, some scholars have looked at the other ages and said, it looks like some of these also have numerical patterns in them, which may even correspond to other things in astronomy. Just like the number of days in a solar year, that's part of astronomy. Maybe these other ages also have something to do with astronomy. And if you look at other cultures around the Israelites in the ancient Near East, they also report similar ages for their patriarchs as a way of illustrating how great our ancestors were. And so maybe these numbers for these different patriarchs, including Abraham, aren't meant to show us literally how old they were, but just to indicate they were very long-lived and very great, and that's illustrated by these very large numbers.
Does that make sense to you, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, it does if you take Genesis symbolically. Can I ask a second question?
Yes, sure.
What's your second question?
If the church teaches, or it doesn't go as far as Darwinism, but it goes as far as evolution, how is that possible if God brought death instead of Adam and Eve? Because it would take things to die.
Mm-hmm. So now the way you posed the question, you drew a distinction between Darwinism and evolution, and that's a tricky thing to do because there's not an official definition of Darwinism. People can understand it differently. And so you just want to be aware of that. In terms of how death operated before the fall, well, actually, Catholic theologians have understood historically that there was death before the fall. It was human death that entered the world because of the fall of man, but animal death is something different. It never says in Scripture that animals wouldn't have died if man had not fallen. And theologians like Thomas Aquinas, for example, would say, yeah, the nature of the animals wasn't different before the fall. Lions would have still preyed on, gazelles or whatever. And even if you took the text of Genesis 1 very literally, there still would have been death before the fall because Adam and Eve and the other animals would have gotten to eat plants. And that means the plant cells that they eat die because your stomach acid is going to take them apart. And so if you eat a piece of fruit, that piece of fruit dies. And so there would have been death before the fall, no matter how literally you take Genesis or how figuratively you take it. It was human death that is the result of the fall of man, not animal death or plant death or fungal death for that matter. So there would have been the death needed to allow God to use evolution as one of his tools.
Hey, I'm going to just say thanks very much for the call, because we have to move to a break, actually, Joseph. But it does sound like you have questions about the book of Genesis, and there are on our website at Catholic.com, you can just type in, whatever keyword, whether it's evolution or the age of the patriarchs. So that there's a lot of material there for you to reflect on. Also, you're always welcome to call back. We have to take a quick break, however, and we will do that right now. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's open forum. And now in the studio, our beloved and esteemed President Chris Check. Hi, Chris.
How are you, gentlemen?
I'm well. How are you, Jimmy?
I'm doing okay.
Beloved and esteemed in the same day.
Well, I heard your, now I'm forgetting what Phil Lawler said about you today.
Oh, distinguished speaker.
Distinguished speaker, yeah, Phil Lawler in his column.
He did. Of course, you can be distinguished in a lot of different ways. There are people like...
Sometimes it just means old.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or you did something very bad.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. That distinguishes you from other people. Right. Why are you here, Chris? Are you here to talk about Christopher Columbus?
I just want to say first that tomorrow's a big day. Our Lady of the Rosary, right?
Oh, praise God. Thanks for saying that.
Victory at Lepanto. Yeah. We'll be celebrating here at Catholic Answers.
Okay.
But yes, Monday is Columbus Day. Or if you live in the United States, Columbus Day.
Wait, what? Why did you make that up? I didn't catch
Well, because it still is on the federal calendar, Columbus Day.
Because very many people are negative about Columbus Day.
They are.
Yes,
and in fact, the negativity really started to kind of bubble up at the 500th anniversary in 1992. And at that time, a very bright gentleman named Robert Royal, who's been on the show here, wrote a book called 1492 and all that, and it was and the subtitle was Political Manipulations of History. And he has subsequently updated the book for Sophia Institute Press. It's called Columbus and the Crisis of the West. And I have the honor to join Dr. Royal on a webinar on Monday, put on by the Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in Merrimack, New Hampshire, run by our dear friend, William Fahey. And we're going to be talking about rediscovering Columbus.
You can go to engage.thomasmorecollege.edu to participate. If you put in the full address, I'm sure you can just find it by going there. But if
if you just go to thomasmorecollege.edu, it's right
you'll
there.
You'll be fine.
It's right there on the
all right,
page.
Then we'll just leave it there. No need to give more information.
Yeah. But I mean, Columbus is a complex character. He was a navigator of almost metaphysical dimension. He was an extraordinary man. There's some like all of us, good and bad elements in his life. But he, as I intend to make the case, he is a principal player in salvation history. When we think of history through the lens of the Incarnation, then Columbus makes sense to us. Yeah. And so that's what I'll be talking about. I'm also doing another talk on Columbus, a longer one, on Sunday for the Institute for Catholic Culture, another webinar.
And it'll be on Columbus as well?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So 2 talks on Columbus, one on Sunday, one on Monday. And that one would be instituteofcatholicculture.org. I always mix that up. instituteofcatholicculture.org and thomasmore.edu. So my friends, those of you who have been hearing lies about Columbus or
maybe would just like to know the truth about him.
Yes, and are unprepared to defend this man or would like to know more about an extraordinary story, tune into both of these.
Thank you, Chris Check. That was very distinguished.
Oh, take care, gentlemen.
We'll be right back.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
As a Catholic talk show host and speaker and author, I'm often asked, how should we pray? How do we pray? Really? It's up to you, and that's between you and the Lord. We have wonderful, wonderful formalized prayers in the Catholic faith, such as a rosary, the Lord's Prayer, novenas, but you can also just open up your heart and say, Lord, help, SOS. It's as simple as that. How you pray is really up to you. Ask the Lord how you should pray, and He'll answer you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and no matter how many questions Jimmy answers, the phones just stay full. So we're going to keep you working, okay, Jimmy?
Okay.
All right, we'll go to, you're very amenable. We'll go to Defiance, Ohio, where Brandon is watching on Facebook Live. Brandon, you there with us?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Brandon. Your question for Jimmy, please.
My question is, knowing, since it's October, knowing Halloween is All Hallows Eve supposed to be the day before All Saints Day, is supposed to be a holy day, knowing that a lot of Protestants are kind of anti-Halloween, they don't celebrate Halloween, but they'll have a harvest party. So my question is, how do we defend the religious, the holy aspects of Halloween, while also explaining the modern ideas or practices of Halloween?
All right, Brandon.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
So in regard to explaining the religious aspects of it, well, we can say, okay, look, the word hallow means holy. It's just another form of the word holy. And that's why in the Lord's Prayer, we say, hallowed be thy name. And most Protestants are familiar with that. They'll say, hallowed be thy name. It means may people treat your name as holy. That's what we're asking God to do. We're hoping and wishing and praying that people will treat God's name as holy. But that's what hallowed be thy name means. And in the same way, a hallow is a holy person. And so it's just another word for saint. English has this dual vocabulary that it got from Latin and German. And the Latin word for saint is sanctus, which is where we get saint from. But the German word gives us hallow. So a hallow is simply a saint. And All Hallows Day is the day where we celebrate all of the saints who are in heaven. And, you know, there are Christian forebears. We want to preserve their memory, just like Protestants preserve the memory of their spiritual forebears. You know, maybe they want to preserve the memory of Martin Luther or John Calvin or someone we have in common like St. Augustine or Thomas Aquinas. But obviously we want to preserve the memory of our Christian forebears. We want to honor their example, and that's what we do on All Saints Day or All Hallows Day. And because this is a special day on the church's calendar, historically, people would get ready for special days, you know, maybe since people worship on Sundays, for example, they may get ready on Saturday night for what they're going to do on Sunday. Christmas is a big day, and so people celebrate Christmas Eve. You know, they do special things on Christmas Eve to get ready for Christmas. And in the same way, people historically have done special things on the eve of All Saints Day. And so the eve of All Hallows Day is Halloween, to say it another way. And so in terms of the religious observances, well, it's just a way of honoring our Christian forebears and the example that they gave us. Now, in terms of the modern celebration, you know, there's a mix. Some modern aspects of pop culture celebration of Halloween aren't that great. And we don't need to defend those, and we can acknowledge that. You know, people running around glorifying evil, well, that's not really in keeping with the spirit of honoring our Christian forebears. On the other hand, we don't have to be puritanical about it. it can be legitimate as a form of just imaginative play to play dress up, and you don't have to play dress up as a saint. Some people do that, but you don't have to. Kids enjoy playing dress up as other things, whether it's, historically, nurses and cops and all kinds of different roles that they might have as adults. And it's not intrinsically wrong to even dress up as a monster just for fun. If you'd like to learn more about that, then I can really go into at the moment. Google Jimmy Akin and Halloween, and you'll come up with some things that I, did on this, like, are scary Halloween costumes okay? For example, I did a video about that some years ago, and you can find that video. But we want to acknowledge that that there are ways of celebrating Halloween that are inappropriate, but there are also ways that are perfectly healthy and just part of ordinary culture that aren't offensive to the faith. One thing, and you didn't ask about this, but this is something I find particularly interesting. You will also have some individuals, and this is far from all Protestants, but you will have some individuals in the Protestant community, only some, criticize Christmas and Easter, claiming that they were originally pagan holidays that Christians hijacked and then created this alternative, more Christian celebration. Well, actually, that's not true. Christians didn't do either one of those things. But even if they had, what's wrong with subverting a pagan holiday and creating an appropriate alternative celebration so that people don't go do the bad celebration? That's what these anti-Halloween folks are doing when they have a harvest festival or a Reformation Day festival or something like that. They say, I don't like Halloween, I don't think it's wholesome, so we're going to create our own alternative celebration that's wholesome so that people won't be tempted to go do the bad one. Well, if there had been pagan holidays that Christians were copying with these, that's all they would have been doing. And guess what? It looks like you're doing the same thing. So what's wrong with Christmas and Easter as wholesome Christian celebrations, even if they were alternatives to pagan ones, which they weren't?
Brandon, thanks for that question. I think you started us off in this sense, Brandon. As Halloween approaches, we generally get the Halloween questions, and we appreciate you starting us off with that. There will, I'm sure, be more questions about whether this is an evil thing as we go forward. So as Jimmy said, just search Jimmy Akin Halloween. You can get all kinds of information about Halloween. Let's go to Caroline in Lansville, Pennsylvania. Hi, Caroline. You there with us?
Oh, well, hi, Cy. Hi, Jimmy. I'm calling from Lansdale, Pennsylvania.
Lansdale. All right.
Yeah.
I thought Lansville sounded kind of funny. All right. Well, welcome. I know Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. That's over near Philadelphia, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. All right. Well, welcome from Lansdale, Caroline. You got a question for Jimmy?
Yes, I do. A dear friend of mine who's a convert from the Presbyterian Church had a question about holy water. And I guess you could say blessed soul, too. Now, he understands that the priest has the power to bless the water and to bless with the water. But when we have the water, say we have a bottle or a little container of salt, we as lay people, in a sense, we can't bless as the priest does. And what in itself is, like what does the holy water that's, what does it do?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So, I'm not entirely sure what distinction you were drawing between lay people and priests when it comes to blessing with these things. I guess kind of the foundational point to make is that holy water and blessed salt are sacramentals. They are not sacraments. The sacraments were instituted by Jesus Christ, and there are certain aspects of the sacraments that the church has no power to change. For example, baptism needs to be done with water, not milk. the church couldn't change it and say, we're going to do baptism with milk now, because the way it was instituted by Christ, it involves water. With sacramentals, though, these were not instituted by Christ and passed down to the church as rituals that we need to do as part of the Christian faith. They are rituals that the church has come up with, and they're kind of like the sacraments in some way, but they're not the same. And so consequently, sacramentals are subject to church law. The church can modify them, it can create them, it can abolish them, it can change them around. And that'll be a key point that we'll discuss coming back on the other side of the break.
Caroline, hope you can hang on for a quick minute. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest, all the lines full. Right back with more questions and answers. And an answer continues for Caroline right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly. Touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world, Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We want to know how our Blessed Mother has aided you during your life.
That's our topic tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now, more of Catholic Answers Live.
Jimmy Akin is our guest. That means fun. That often means groovy music, but I guess on a Tuesday probably doesn't mean groovy music. I just got my hopes up a little bit because I think you hit him with the groovy music on Friday, didn't you, Nick? I think, yeah. All right, so it is a movable feast a little bit, the groovy music. Jimmy Akin is senior.
But I will be back Thursday.
Okay, so there's still hope for this week. Just planting an idea there, Nick. As I was saying, Jimmy's a senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of a whole bunch of things. And when we went to the break, we were talking with Caroline in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, about blessing water and salt and why the priest can do it, but the laity can't. And then what is the water and salt used for? Jimmy, you wanted to continue with your answer.
Yeah, so the point I was making before the break is that sacramentals are a creation of church law, and so who gets to do them and how they're done is something that church law controls, since it's not a matter of divine law. These aren't things that Jesus gave us and said, do this. So that's the fundamental reason why priests can bless holy water but ordinary lay people can't. It's simply because that's what church law says. And there's a reason for that, which is, priests are holy by virtue of their office, and so it's reasonable that they have a greater involvement in the sacramentals than we do. But there are sacramentals that ordinary people can perform. like the blessing of throats on St. Blaise Day. You don't have to be a priest or even a deacon to do that. Ordinary lay people can do that. Similarly, as you note, with holy water and blessed salt, even though we don't bless them ourselves, we can use them as lay people. And in terms of what happens when we use them, well, they can be used for a variety of different functions. I mean, you can use holy water to baptize people. You can use holy water to sprinkle people as a reminder of their baptism. You can dip your fingers in it and make the sign of the cross as a reminder of your baptism. But fundamentally, when an item has been blessed for use as a sacramental, like water or salt, it's a way of setting it apart from common use so that when you use it, you're using it with reference to God. And so you're, in essence, asking God to do something when you use this. And basically, you're asking God to bless you. And so that blessing could actually be taken up into a sacrament, like the sacrament of baptism, or it can be done in memory of a sacrament, like when you enter a church and you make the sign of the cross after dipping your fingers in holy water. It's a reminder of your baptism, and you're asking God to bless you in a new way now. It's not the same as baptism, but you're still asking for a blessing. And the same thing is true about using blessed salt or other things. It's basically a way of asking for God to give you his grace. So it's a kind of physically enacted prayer.
Caroline, thanks. I hope it was helpful. I'm going to keep moving. Tons of folks on the line. Sean in Fort Perry, Canada, with us next. Sean, your question for Jimmy?
Hi, Jimmy. I have wondered about this for some time, and I'm wanting to articulate the question in a way that doesn't sound flippant, because it has to do with how the office of papal infallibility is exercised. Christ gave the successors of St. Peter the ability to bind and loose according to the Gospel of St. Matthew. And yet, from what I understand, the use of infallibility in terms of proclaiming a church teaching has only been used approximately once a century. So I'm not, as I said, trying to be flippant and saying, why doesn't the Pope make everything infallible, like I want an egg for breakfast? But I'm just confused as to why it is used so sparingly when it is a gift God gave to the church, and it seems to me
yes, it is. I mean, I don't even, the 1850s or something, the last time it was used, right?
1950.
1950. Oh, okay. Sorry. My bad.
So, first of all, with papal infallibility is not the only way the church exercises its infallibility. It does so in other ways as well, such as through an ecumenical council. And there have been more than, we're in the 21st century, there have been more than 21 propositions that have been infallibly defined by popes. And there have been even more than that when you bring in infallible definitions made by ecumenical councils. But you're right, it tends to not be the default. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them is the main points that most urgently need definition have already been infallibly defined, like the divinity of Christ. That was infallibly defined at the very first ecumenical council. And the divinity of the Holy Spirit, that was defined at the Second Ecumenical Council. And so the core points of the faith, the ones that it would be really urgent for us to have a very clear understanding, definitely true and really definitely part of the faith, those have already been done. And so typically, because it involves a bit of a convulsion every time you make an infallible definition, it takes a while to get the word out about it and to get people to accept it, and some people don't accept it, and you may have a schism. The church tends to guide people towards the truth in a way that doesn't, drop the atomic bomb on a question and at every single instance. It tries to lead like a father or a shepherd and guide people towards the truth without dropping the hammer as its first response. And so consequently, if it's possible to deal with a situation in a way that doesn't involve infallibility, that's been the response that the magisterium, including the popes, have tended to do. And that tendency has grown even more in recent times when there's more religious plurality in the world, and the chances of schism and people just saying, oh, I'm done with this, is greater, because you run a risk of alienating them from the truth, whereas if you were more gentle about leading them along, you might be able to help bring them closer to God. And so even over hot-button issues in the 20th century, like the ordination of women to the priesthood or abortion or euthanasia, these are things that rather than issue new infallible definitions, John Paul II said, actually, these have already been infallibly defined by what's called the ordinary and universal magisterium of the Church, that the bishops have been in agreement historically that these are definitively required of the Catholic faithful. And so this has already been settled. But you'll notice he did that in a way he could have just said, well, I'm dropping the hammer now, new infallible definition. But that would have been very alienating to many people. And so he tried to make the point that these are the truths, and we really know these are the truths, but in a way that wasn't as confrontational and that had a greater potential to lead people towards the truth in a more gentle manner.
Sean, I hope it's helpful. I'm going to keep moving, as I keep saying. Lots of folks on the line, so we'll continue. Jimmy Aiken, Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live. Let's go to Al in Michigan, watching on YouTube Live. Hi, Al.
Hi, Ty. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to.
And thank you. Thanks for Jimmy, too. So, Jimmy, okay, I'll try to be brief. It's about grace in general. So, grace in in the Catechism, I forgot the paragraph of the Catholic Church, of course. It means simply a free, undeserved gift. So, does it have a different meaning from the New, or between the Old and New Testament, in the sense that did the New Testament writers or authors, especially St. Paul and John, used it to indicate, to refer only to the grace we got through our Lord and Savior, especially in his passion, death, and resurrection? And can this, if you say free, undeserved gift, doesn't this apply to anything we have, including like my life, my body organs?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Al.
Okay.
So you got that, Jimmy.
There's not a fundamental difference in the meaning of the word grace between the Old and the New Testament, and the basic it has slightly different nuances in Greek than in Hebrew or Aramaic, but it's fundamentally the same concept. And there is a difference in the kinds of grace that we receive in the New Testament. We receive greater graces as a result of Christ's sacrifice than people in the Old Testament received, but they also received grace. And some of the graces were the same. We're forgiven of our sins, they were forgiven of their sins, and so forth. It would take a whole course to go through and do all the different nuances here. But the bottom lines are the concept is fundamentally the same, but we receive more and better graces in the New Testament than were received in the Old Testament. And there, in terms of the final question about isn't everything we have a grace? Yes. So like life itself is a grace, salvation is a grace, but life and salvation are two different orders of grace. Life is sometimes part of what's called the order of creation, just by the fact that we're alive. I mean, we're part of the created order, but that's true even of people who are alive who are not God's friends. They also have received life as a grace in the order of creation. But that's distinct from what's sometimes called the order of redemption, because if someone has turned their back on God, they may have the gift of life, but they don't have the gift of justification or forgiveness or salvation or however you want to put it. And so there's a distinction between the gifts God gives us in the created order, like life and health and things like that, and the gifts that God gives us in the salvific or redemptive order, like justification and sanctification and forgiveness. So yes, everything is a grace in that sense, but there are two different orders of grace, that of creation and that of redemption.
Al, got to leave it there. Got to take a quick break. Right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Don't you feel sometimes like there's so many people in the world? How does he hear your prayer? Never think of that, huh? Everybody thinks of that. I'm only a little grain of sand on the seashore. Oh, but that's not true. See, God is God. And you and I have to let God be God. I don't know how he does it. He's God.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin, of course, our guest. He's senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And if it seems like I'm going quickly between callers, it's because there's lots and lots of callers today. So we go now to Gene in Boise, Idaho, listening on Salt and Light Radio. Gene, glad to have you with us. Your question for Jimmy.
Hi. So I'm a nurse, and I understand how Jesus and Mary's blood must have mixed during the 9 months.
Right.
Which to me is even more reason why Mary would have needed to be immaculate and full of grace in God's plan. So here's my crazy question. Do we think that he shared half her DNA too?
Well, the church hasn't addressed this question, but so this is a matter of theology rather than doctrine. But the church does teach as a matter of doctrine that Mary was Jesus's mother and that she was his true mother, and you know, he was in her womb, she's his biological mother, and so because she is Jesus's true mother, she would have it would seem to follow from that theologically that the things that are true of an ordinary mother would be true of Mary, unless it's revealed otherwise. And one of the things that is characteristic of true mothers is that they have half of the same DNA as their children. And since it's not revealed otherwise, we would assume that Mary shares at least half of her DNA with Jesus. So yeah, but that's a matter of theology rather than doctrine.
Okay. Well, that's a lot to ponder on that, and that's a
Gene, if I may, because you're a nurse, and this is something that people haven't known for a long time. It's kind of a newer insight of science, but people know that the baby receives from the mother, but the baby's blood cells get into the mother's bloodstream.
Yeah, especially at birth when it separates, which is why the Rh negative. They need to have the RhoGAM shot to prevent building up antibodies.
Yeah, so you think about
blood in case they get pregnant again.
Yeah, so the blood of the Savior was in Mary's veins as well. I mean, it's just I don't know that I'm not sure where to go with that reflection, but it's an astonishing thing to think about. That incredible intimacy between the two of them. Gene, thanks. I'm going to keep moving because there's a lot of folks want to ask Jimmy questions. Up next, Chris in Miami, Florida, listening on the TuneIn app. Chris, your question for Jimmy.
Hey, guys. You guys are awesome. Jimmy Akin, celebrity in my house. Love Mysterious World.
Cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Now, real quick, so I know you guys are in a hurry. My question is this. I understand why it's helpful to pray to saints to intercede on our behalf. But what about devotions? And I ask that because I heard about a group called a confraternity that involves signing up and having a special devotion to a saint. In addition, joining this group means, as they put it, having a pact and supernatural brotherhood and bond between us on earth and saints in heaven. What's your view on that, and what's the church's view on devotions and being a part of a group like this?
Well, so devotions are practices that are separate from the church's official liturgy, but that people find spiritually helpful. Some devotions are genuinely helpful. Some are helpful to some people, but not to other people. And some are deformed in a way that they're not helpful. Devotions can contain false elements. And so consequently, the church regulates what types of devotions it approves. And, if you want to publish a particular devotion, for example, you're typically going to need to get a bishop's imprimatur on it as a kind of check to see, is this a devotion that is reasonably helpful to people, or could it be, could it contain a kind of false spirituality in some way? But if it's an approved devotion, then it should be presumed to be wholesome. And the same would be true of an organization like a confraternity that has a devotion to a particular saint or group of saints. If the local bishop has approved of it, meaning the place where it was founded, then it should be presumed healthy until the reverse is shown to be true. That doesn't mean it's for everybody. Different people have different spiritualities. You may or may not find it personally helpful to you. If you do, great. If you don't, great. One is not obliged to have any particular devotion or set of devotions. And so consequently, it's really up to you and what you find helpful. But I would look at the approval status of either a particular devotion or an organization that supports that devotion as a kind of check to see, is it likely to contain problematic elements or not?
Okay, Chris?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being so quick. You could tell we're trying to get everybody in here. Appreciate that. Let's go to Noah in Illinois, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Noah, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I've really appreciated everything that you guys have done on here. I really appreciate Jimmy's words on here, and I've grown up a Protestant my whole life, but I've come to really appreciate a lot about the Catholic Church as I've learned more about it. Didn't know much about it until recently, but I've been doing a lot of research, and I definitely I think understand a lot of the biblical and, of course, historical support for the Catholic doctrines that are a feature of the Catholic Church, as opposed to others like Protestantism, namely. I feel like at this point in where I'm at with understanding it, I'm most apprehensive right now, just kind of generally over the way that Catholics seem, and I mean, I don't want to make any. I don't have any background to understand exactly what it's like in the Catholic Church, of course, because I've never attended it. But how the Catholic Church uses sacraments, and specifically trying to use the sacraments in a way that doesn't overemphasize the act of the sacrament physically, and separating it from
the faith behind it.
Yes.
Okay. I can that's a very clear question, I think, Noah. Jimmy,
okay.
The Catholic view of sacraments?
So it sounds like, and I'm not surprised that you mentioned you have a Protestant background, Noah, because the term work has a really loaded history in Protestant circles. One of the things that has been stressed since the beginning of the Reformation in Protestant circles in particular is we are not saved by works. And so whenever you have a Protestant looking at things in the Catholic Church, they're on the lookout for, could there be too much emphasis being placed on works of some kind, because they've been taught historically that that's a big spiritual danger and that it's one that the Catholic Church is guilty of. And so someone coming from a Protestant background naturally looks for that. And it's something that when I was becoming Catholic, I, had that same orientation and approach. Now, there are several things that I think can be helpful here. The first one is actually, when you study St. Paul's writings, it doesn't look like he's using the word works to refer to what most or many people in the Protestant community do. Sometimes in the Protestant community, you will have works defined very broadly as just anything you do. But that's clearly not how Paul's using it, because Paul tells people to do stuff, even with regard to salvation, like repent and, trust God and believe and things like that. All of those are actions you perform. And so all of those are works in the sense of something you do. So obviously, Paul's not using the word works in that expansive sense. Other people have had a bit of a narrower understanding of works as like actions performed by human effort in an attempt to earn salvation from God. And some Catholics would suppose that's what Paul means. And we do not believe that we need to do works by human effort in order to earn salvation from God. We can't, properly speaking, earn anything from God. And as the Council of Trent itself said, nothing that precedes justification, whether faith or works, merits the state of justification, because it's a matter of grace. And so consequently, Catholics do not do good works in order to get into a state of grace. However, other scholars have looked at what St. Paul has said and concluded, it looks like he's talking about something very specific. It looks like he's talking about actions that people do in order to fulfill the Mosaic law, which is why he talks in principle about circumcision in Romans and Galatians, because that was the key thing you did to become a Jew. And what he's really saying is you don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to obey the Mosaic law in order to be saved. You can be a Gentile Christian. That's clearly his overarching message in Romans and Galatians. So once you understand that, or if you buy that, and that's personally what I think, then you realize you don't have to be on the lookout so much for works, because the Catholic Church isn't saying you need to be circumcised in order to be saved, or you need to keep kosher in order to be saved, or you need to be a Jew in order to be saved. The Catholic Church isn't saying any of those things. And so consequently, the Church isn't emphasizing works the way Paul is talking about. If you want to read more about that, I'm going to recommend my book, The Drama of Salvation. In fact, Cy, why don't we see if we can send Noah a copy of it, because we're going to run out of time.
Okay.
But in terms of matters of practice, what I can tell you is, as a Catholic, like if I go to confession, I am not thinking, I'm going to earn my place before God here. What's foremost on my mind is I'm a sinner and I need to be forgiven. And so I'm not emphasizing any kind of work on my part. Why I'm there is I want to be forgiven, and this is just me asking God to forgive me, and he's promised that if I do this, he will. Similarly, if I go to communion, I'm thinking about my unworthiness and how it's a grace to be even able to receive Jesus Christ in his body, blood, soul, and divinity. I'm not emphasizing myself and my works. I'm emphasizing him. So as a basic sketch, and if you want to call in the future, I'd be happy to talk with you further. Unfortunately, because of the music, I can't right now, but call again and we'll be happy to help you out. But that's a basic sketch of how Catholics would look at this and what it's like experiencing the sacramental life as a Catholic.
Noah, thank you so much for the call. Please do hang on the line, and Marie will get your information if you'd like to get Jimmy's book, Drama of Salvation. And let me just tell you something, you would like to get this book. It's very, very helpful. Hey, Jimmy Akin, thanks very much. We'll see you again on Thursday, right?
See you then.
And tomorrow, man, we've got some fun. We've got Steve Ray, the first hour, and Father Tad Paholczyk, second hour. Guess what the topic will be, Nick? Second hour, Tad Paholczyk. What's it going to be? Father Tad Paholczyk. Yes, bioethics. How'd you guess? All right, we'll see you then, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.